Look, I'm just going to be real with you about what happened because honestly, I'm still processing all this mess. I'm Amy, I'm 24, and 6 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I mean, I really thought I was living the dream. You know, 4 years with Colton, this guy who had his life together, good income, nice apartment that we shared, and he was even talking about proposing once I got my finances sorted out, which between you and me, I wasn't in any rush to do because having someone else handle most of the bills while I kept my money for myself was pretty sweet. I worked part time doing administrative stuff, nothing too serious, but it covered my personal expenses while he handled rent, groceries, utilities, all that heavy stuff. Looking back, maybe I should have seen the signs that I was getting bored, but honestly, Colton was just so predictable. Same routine every week, same date spots, same conversations about our future together. Don't get me wrong, stability is nice and all, but where's the excitement? Where's the butterflies? I started feeling like I was dating my roommate more than my boyfriend. That's when Trevor came into the picture through my best friend's boyfriend's group. Trevor was different. He actually listened when I talked, complimented me, made me feel like I was special instead of just another item on Colton's to do list. At first, it really was innocent. Just talking at group hangouts, maybe some harmless flirting that made me feel alive again. But Trevor started asking me to coffee, just the two of us. And I figured, what's the harm? We're just friends, right? I wasn't doing anything wrong by having a male friend who appreciated me. It felt so good to have someone who was genuinely interested in what I had to say, who made me laugh, who didn't spend our conversations talking about mortgage rates and retirement plans like Colton did. I started looking forward to seeing Trevor more than spending time with my own boyfriend, but I told myself that was normal. Everyone needs friends outside their relationship. The thing is, I noticed I was being more secretive about it, not mentioning Trevor to Colton, deleting our text conversations, making sure we never posted anything on social media together. But that was just because I knew Colton would overreact and get jealous, not because I was doing anything wrong. He's always been a little possessive anyway, asking where I'm going, who I'm with, checking my phone occasionally when he thought I wasn't looking. So I started keeping my phone locked and getting defensive when he'd ask about my day or my plans. I'd flip it back on him, asking why he didn't trust me, why he was being so controlling, making him feel guilty for even questioning me. Meanwhile, I'm meeting Trevor for lunch dates, coffee, long walks, basically going on dates with another man, while coming home to Colton every night. The emotional connection with Trevor was intense, way more intense than anything I'd felt with Colton in months. Trevor made me feel desired, spontaneous, like I was worth pursuing. With Colton, I felt taken for granted, like he assumed I'd always be there, so he didn't need to try anymore. Looking back, maybe he was just comfortable in our relationship, but I needed more than comfort. I needed excitement, passion, someone who made me feel like I was worth fighting for. That's when things crossed the line physically with Trevor. And honestly, in that moment, I didn't even think about Colton. All I could think about was how alive I felt, how wanted, how this was what I'd been missing. Trevor used protection. So it wasn't like I was being completely reckless. And I told myself it was just a one-time thing, a moment of weakness that didn't really mean anything in the grand scheme of my relationship with Colton. The thing is, it wasn't just one time. After that first night with Trevor, I couldn't stay away. I was living this double life, and honestly, I was enjoying every minute of it. The thrill of sneaking around, the rush of almost getting caught, the power of having two men who wanted me, it was intoxicating. I started being deliberately distant with Colton, picking fights over stupid stuff so I'd have an excuse to storm out and meet up with Trevor. When Colton would try to plan romantic dates or surprise me with little gifts, I'd find something wrong with it. Too cheesy, trying too hard, not spontaneous enough, whatever excuse I could come up with, because everything he did felt forced compared to the natural chemistry I had with Trevor. I was gaslighting the hell out of Colton without even realizing it. He'd say, I seem different, distant, always on my phone, and I'd turn it around on him. You're being paranoid. You don't trust me. Maybe if you paid more attention to me instead of your work, I wouldn't need to find conversation elsewhere. I made him question his own instincts about what was happening right in front of his face. The sick part is, I was getting off on it, making him doubt himself while I was out there doing exactly what he suspected. I'd weaponize our intimacy too, becoming cold and unresponsive with him while being passionate with Trevor, then blaming Colton for our lack of connection. We don't have that spark anymore, I'd tell him, knowing damn well I was saving all my passion for someone else. When he'd ask what he could do to fix things, I'd give him impossible standards or constantly moving goalposts. First, it was more date nights, then it was different types of dates, then it was more spontaneity, then it was less pressure. Round and round until he was exhausted trying to figure out what I wanted. The truth was, I didn't want him to fix anything because I was getting everything I needed from Trevor, but I also wasn't ready to give up the security and stability that Colton provided. Why should I have to choose? I was 24. I deserved to feel desired and excited. And if one man couldn't give me everything I needed, why was it wrong to get different needs met by different people? Trevor started pressuring me to leave Colton, telling me we could be together for real. But honestly, I wasn't stupid. Trevor worked retail, barely made enough to cover his own bills, lived with 3 roommates in a sketchy part of town. What kind of future could he offer me? I liked him for the excitement and validation, but I wasn't about to downgrade my entire lifestyle for some guy who couldn't even afford to take me on proper dates. So, I started future faking with both of them, telling Trevor I was planning to leave Colton soon, telling Colton I wanted us to work on our relationship and get back to where we used to be. Both of them believed me because I'm a good liar when I need to be. I was staying out later, being more reckless about covering my tracks, getting sloppy with my stories because part of me wanted to get caught. I wanted the drama, the confrontation, the chance to finally force a decision instead of living in this exhausting limbo. When Trevor started hinting about us moving in together, I'd laugh it off, but secretly I was horrified. The fantasy was fun, but the reality would have been a nightmare, going from Colton's comfortable apartment and financial stability to Trevor's chaotic living situation. No, thank you. But I kept stringing Trevor along because I wasn't ready to give up the excitement he brought to my life. Then my period was late, and everything changed in an instant. The morning I realized my period was late, I felt this cold panic wash over me. I'm usually pretty regular, so when I was 3 days late, I knew something was up. I drove to 3 different pharmacies to buy pregnancy tests because I was paranoid about running into someone I knew. Sitting on my bathroom floor at 6 in the morning, waiting for those results, I was praying it would be negative. But deep down, I already knew. When that second line appeared, my first thought wasn't about the baby or becoming a mother. It was pure calculation about damage control. I immediately started doing the math in my head, trying to figure out the timeline, and my stomach dropped when I realized the dates lined up more with Trevor than with Colton. I hadn't been intimate with Colton in weeks because I'd been avoiding him, making excuses, being cold and distant. But with Trevor, we'd been reckless that one time when the condom broke, and we were both too caught up in the moment to stop. I knew right then that this baby was probably Trevor's, but I also knew that admitting that would destroy any chance I had of keeping my life with Colton intact. So I immediately started planning how to handle this situation to minimize damage to myself. My first move was to cut off physical contact with Trevor completely and try to initiate intimacy with Colton, but it was too late and the timeline wouldn't add up anyway. Then Colton's friends saw me with Trevor at a coffee shop, and everything started unraveling. When Colton confronted me about cheating, I went into full damage control mode. I minimized the affair, made it sound like a brief mistake, a moment of weakness that meant nothing. Then I dropped the pregnancy bomb right in the middle of his anger, using it like a weapon to shift the entire conversation. I watched his face change from fury to shock to this cold, calculated look I'd never seen before. I started crying, telling him how scared I was, how much I needed him, how this could be a fresh start for us. I swore up and down that the baby was his because Trevor and I had always used protection. conveniently leaving out the part about it failing. I was betting everything on Colton's love for me being stronger than his anger about the cheating. I genuinely believed that once the shock wore off, he'd step up and we'd work through this together. In my mind, men are supposed to protect and provide for the women they love. And if he really loved me, he'd get over the cheating and focus on our future family. But instead of falling apart or begging me to work things out like I expected, Colton got scary calm. He told me to pack my stuff and get out, that he wanted nothing to do with me until paternity was established. When I tried to argue, tried to use tears and manipulation, he just stared at me with this dead expression and repeated himself, "Pack my stuff and get out." I was genuinely shocked that he was kicking me out while I was pregnant and scared. Where was his compassion? Where was his sense of responsibility? Even if he was angry about the cheating, shouldn't his priority be making sure his pregnant girlfriend was safe and cared for? I tried every manipulation tactic I could think of, crying about being scared and alone, reminding him of our 4 years together, promising I'd end things with Trevor and be the girlfriend he deserved. Nothing worked. He was like a different person, cold and logical when I needed him to be emotional and protective. When I finally accepted that he wasn't going to change his mind, I moved in with my best friend and immediately started planning my comeback strategy. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Living at my friend's place, I was constantly plotting how to get back into Colton's good graces. I knew the key was this baby because deep down I was still convinced it had to be his. Yeah, the timeline was sketchy, but miracles happen, right? Maybe I miscalculated. Maybe the dates were closer than I thought. I had to believe that because the alternative was too horrible to consider. I started researching the most expensive pregnancy options I could find: luxury midwife services, high end doula packages, organic everything, prenatal massage therapy, the works. If this baby was Colton's, he was going to pay for all of it. And if I was going to be pregnant and miserable, I might as well get the VIP treatment. Part of me was also thinking that the more expensive everything was, the more guilty he'd feel later about making me handle it alone. I wanted him to see those bills and realize what a terrible person he was for abandoning his pregnant girlfriend over one mistake. When he said he'd pay for everything after paternity was confirmed, I took that as permission to go absolutely wild with the spending. Designer maternity clothes, the most expensive prenatal vitamins, weekly spa treatments for pregnancy stress. I justified it all as necessary for the baby's health. I was also spreading my version of the story to everyone who would listen. Poor me, pregnant and abandoned by my boyfriend who couldn't forgive one moment of weakness. I made sure to leave out the part about the affair lasting months and focus on how cruel he was being to an expectant mother. Most people were sympathetic, especially the women, telling me that real men step up when their women are pregnant, that he was showing his true colors by prioritizing his ego over his child's well-being. I collected every supportive comment like ammunition for when I'd eventually confront him again. Meanwhile, I was still in contact with Trevor, but I made sure to keep his financial situation vague. When people asked about the baby's father, I'd just say things like, "It's complicated," or "He's not in a position to help right now." I couldn't let anyone know that the potential alternative father was a broke retail worker because that would make me look even worse. Trevor kept asking what we were going to do if the baby was his, and I'd always deflect or change the subject because honestly, I hadn't even considered that possibility seriously. In my mind, this baby had to be Colton's because anything else would ruin everything I'd worked for. I started having dreams about the paternity test coming back positive for Colton, about him breaking down and apologizing for doubting me, about us getting back together and being stronger than ever. I fantasized about him proposing during my pregnancy as a way to make up for how he'd treated me. The medical bills started piling up, but I wasn't worried because I was so sure everything would work out in my favor. Every expensive treatment, every luxury service, every premium option was an investment in my future with Colton once he realized he was going to be a father. When pregnancy complications started developing and I needed emergency care, I almost felt vindicated. This was serious. This was life or death. Surely now he'd see how wrong he was to abandon me during such a critical time. But even when I was rushed to the hospital, even when they told me the baby might not make it, Colton remained firm about waiting for DNA results before getting involved. I couldn't understand how he could be so heartless, so cold, so willing to risk his own child's life over his wounded pride. The day those DNA results came back saying Colton wasn't the father, I felt like my entire world collapsed. But instead of accepting responsibility for the mess I'd created, I immediately went into denial and blame mode. This had to be wrong. The test had to be faulty. There had to be some mistake, because my entire plan depended on this baby being Colton's. When the second test confirmed the same results, I shifted into desperate manipulation mode. I called Colton crying, begging him to reconsider, telling him that DNA didn't matter because we'd built a life together and he could still choose to be this baby's father. I reminded him of our 4 years together, all our plans, all our dreams, and how one mistake shouldn't erase everything we had. I genuinely believed that if I could just find the right words, the right emotional appeal, I could convince him to overlook the paternity issue and step up anyway. That's what love was supposed to be, right? Choosing someone despite their flaws and mistakes. But Colton was completely unmoved by my tears and pleas. He told me he felt sorry for my situation, but that it wasn't his responsibility to fix the consequences of my choices. When I tried to guilt him about abandoning a helpless baby, he calmly pointed out that Trevor was the father and should be the one stepping up. That's when reality hit me like a truck. Trevor, working retail, living paycheck to paycheck, barely able to cover his own expenses, was supposed to help me with over $40,000 in medical bills. I started panicking about the money for the first time. But instead of accepting that I'd created this situation, I got angry at everyone else for failing me. I was furious at Colton for being so heartless and selfish, at Trevor for being broke and useless, at the medical system for being so expensive, at everyone except myself. I enlisted my family to help pressure Colton, painting myself as a victim who made one mistake and deserved forgiveness and support. My mom and sister started calling him, telling him he was being cruel and vindictive, that real men don't abandon women in their time of need, regardless of paternity. But Colton had apparently grown a backbone and told my family that their daughter's choices had consequences, and it wasn't his job to rescue me from them. I was so angry, I could barely see straight. How dare he turn my own family against me? How dare he make me look like the villain when I was the one suffering? I had a newborn baby, crushing debt, no support system, and he was just going to walk away like our 4 years together meant nothing. When Trevor finally stepped up and acknowledged paternity, I thought maybe things would work out. But then I learned exactly how broke he really was. His monthly income wouldn't even cover one of my hospital bills, let alone the ongoing expenses of raising a child. I felt trapped between two men who were both failing me in different ways. Colton had the means to help, but chose not to. And Trevor wanted to help, but was basically useless financially. Neither of them was willing to do what needed to be done to fix my situation. 6 months later, my life is completely destroyed, and somehow everyone thinks it's my fault. The final nail in my coffin came when screenshots of my private messages got leaked online. Apparently, my friend's boyfriend had been saving everything I'd said about my strategy to get Colton back, including some really unflattering comments I'd made about Trevor that probably sounded worse out of context. Suddenly, everyone in our social circle could see exactly how I'd been planning and manipulating the whole situation. And instead of having sympathy for a struggling single mother, they all turned on me like I was some kind of monster. My family found out about all the lies I'd told them, about how long the affair had really lasted, about how I'd been planning to trap Colton with a baby that wasn't even his. They were disgusted with me and cut off all support, financial and emotional. I lost my job because the drama followed me to work, and my boss decided I was too much of a liability. Now I'm stuck living with my aunt, who treats me like I'm a burden, thus working minimum wage jobs that barely cover basic expenses, watching my credit get destroyed by medical bills I can't pay. The bankruptcy paperwork is sitting on my kitchen table waiting to be filed, which means I'll be financially ruined before I turn 25. Trevor moved to Houston to escape all the drama and get a fresh start, leaving me completely alone with a baby I never really wanted in the first place. But the worst part is watching Colton thrive without me. He got promoted at work, started going to therapy, began posting pictures of himself traveling, and looking genuinely happy for the first time in years. Then he started dating this woman who's everything I pretended to be: supportive and encouraging, and actually interested in his boring hobbies. She comments sweet things on all his posts, shows up to his work events, basically acts like the perfect girlfriend I never bothered to be. Last month, I found out they're engaged. And seeing that ring on her finger made me want to scream. That should have been me. That should have been my ring, my future, my financial security. Instead, I'm stuck in this nightmare life that feels like punishment for one mistake. Everyone keeps telling me I need to take responsibility and learn from this experience, but honestly, I'm tired of being blamed for everything. Yes, I cheated, but Colton was neglecting me emotionally long before Trevor came along. Yes, I lied about paternity, but I was scared and desperate and trying to protect my family. Yes, I spent money I couldn't afford, but Colton promised to pay for everything if the baby was his. So how was I supposed to know to be careful? Trevor should have been more responsible about birth control. My friends should have minded their own business instead of spreading my private conversations. My family should have stood by me instead of judging me. And Colton should have been man enough to help raise a child, regardless of whose DNA it carried. I don't understand why I'm the only one being held accountable when everyone else made choices that contributed to this mess. The baby deserves better than this life I can give her, but I'm stuck now, and there's no way out. I look at other women my age posting about their happy relationships and stable lives, and I feel like I've been cheated out of everything I deserved. Maybe I made some mistakes, but I didn't deserve to have my entire future destroyed over it. Colton moved on and found happiness like I never existed, while I'm stuck dealing with the consequences of choices we both made. If he really loved me the way he claimed to, he would have fought for our relationship instead of throwing 4 years away the minute things got complicated. But apparently, his love came with conditions that mine never did. And now I have to live with the results of trusting someone who abandoned me when I needed him. If this confession kept you hooked, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We share powerful true stories every day that explore the complex realities of life.